The Marquis de Portago died in his Ferrari on the 12th of May, 1957. His death brought to an end, in a most characteristic fashion, one of the most colorful sporting careers of the century. But Fan was more than a sportsman. He was an adventurer and a rebel, and to most people, perhaps even his fellow drivers, a living representation of a dying race, that fast diminishing race of dragon slayers, of crusaders, of Columbuses and Cortezes. In pursuit of new adventures, he exhausted the dangerous sports and distinguished himself at all of them. That he should be killed on the threshold of a magnificent racing career is a great loss to racing and to the world of people who still retain an ounce of romance in them. Yet it is somehow fitting. By the very nature of their lives, people like Portago do not die in bed. Their flags remain flying on the many competitive fields where they enjoyed their greatest triumphs to the very end. And some of Portago's great enthusiasm for the sport will remain with us, for we will not easily relinquish the memory of the excitement we lived through his feats. At motor racing, he was a newcomer, 3 short years, yet he had already gained a seat on the official Ferrari team. He had more natural talent than anyone who ever raced. His highly developed competitive spirit had gained for him the respect as well as the admiration of his fellow drivers, and they were not reluctant to grant him his due. Luigi Chinetti, with whom Fan drove his first race, told about his great drive in the Grand Prix of Cuba.
He was the driving of a champion, not because he was ahead for 70 laps and only a small mechanical accident make him drop back to position. But I may tell now why we consider him a future champion, because after the race in New York, taking apart the brake drum, the clutch, and we find those parts in perfect condition, ready to go for another 500-kilometer race. And when a driver may afford to go around at such a high speed like Portago in Cuba and finish with a, we may say, a brand new brake, is because he has the inside possibility to become a real champ. This car is here now, used in practice, is efficient as he when he was new. And we watch Portago since Caracas 1955, 56, and this has steady improvement. He listened a lot. Now he's not a wide driver like he was used to be 2 or 3 years ago. And now, especially following a good driver like Fangio Sterling Moss, he find out the truth is with Fangio. And so he's trying very hard to not only to copy Fangio, but in this portion, since he's very young, to improve. And Marquis de Portago has easy 10 or 15 years more to go, and for sure one day he's probably the world champion. Very, very sure.
You think that someday he will be world champion?
Yes, absolutely.
The truth is with Fangio, a fitting motto for any aspiring driver, and Portago had learned this. Fangio himself, a taciturn man, slow to praise undeservedly, took notice of Portago and gave a frank and prophetic opinion before the Cuba race. Portago himself conducts the interview.
Bueno, el circuito es bastante peligroso, hay que andar con cuidado, si llueve con más razón.
Fangio says that the circuit is very dangerous, and if it rains, it's going to be absolute murder.
How does this compare to Monaco?
¿Cómo compara esto con Monte Carlo?
Ah, es distinto, este es veloz y Monte Carlo no es veloz.
This is completely different. This is a fast circuit, and Monte Carlo is a slow circuit.
Who does he expect this competition to come from?
¿Quién crees que te puede ganar aquí?
Y bueno, hay muchos, empezando por vos.
He very kindly and diplomatically says that he thinks that I am his most dangerous rival, but I fear he's exaggerating.
But this was no exaggeration. Portago drove his most perfect race, leading handsomely for 70 of the 90 laps, and dropping back to third only by mechanical circumstance. We spoke with Peter Collins, the young man who almost wrested Fangio's crown from him last year after the Cuba race. Of Portago, he said,
"He's a man who is devoted to sport, whether it be skiing, bobsleighing, water skiing, swimming, fishing, hunting, whatever it might be. But as far as motor racing is concerned, he's got a tremendous enthusiasm, a great deal of ability, and as soon as he learns how to moderate his ability with his ability, in other words, he knows how to drive well and fast, but he does tend to go off the road, in my own opinion. I don't know. I mean, he obviously won't agree with me on this, but he does tend to fly off the road, and you obviously can't go off the road and win motor races. And I think that once he can arrive at a decision, which can only be with himself, that he will drive slower than he wants to drive, and he knows he can, and stay on the road and become reliable, then he'll be one of the best drivers that there are in the world today. I hope that he continues to drive like he did today, because, in my opinion, on his form today, if he goes on driving like that in sports cars and in Grand Prix cars, he'll be up among the world champions tomorrow. Sure of it.
Count von Trips, one of the brilliant newcomers to racing, supported Collins's opinion.
Oh, look, Portago is very bold, and he's going for things where you must dare very much. And so he started horseback riding, and then he went up with bobsleigh, and then he started racing. And he started it just the way, sit in a car and go as fast as possible, and if he even turns over, and so he wouldn't mind. And out of this, in the first time, everybody said, oh, he is not good, because he is too rough, he ruins the car, and he will turn over, and things like that. And nobody, and even the factory always put him a second driver, because they said, no, we are afraid. But slowly in the last year, we all discovered that he is a great, talented driver, and he himself was working on himself, to push his wild emotion down, and to get a real good driver. And I think he is just on the spot being one of the world's best drivers.
But no man is just the sum of what his friends think of him. And Portago, because he was a spectacular and colorful personality, was many things to many people. He died in the pursuit of a career to which he had given all his time and energy, and that great competitive spirit which made him what he was. Thus it is fitting that he should tell his own story, make his own summation, complete himself the picture of his full, exciting life.
Well, what I told you, I used to ride horses all the time. It was a full-time occupation. I used to race a lot, and I was leading amateur rider in France for 3 years. And I went away for a couple of weeks, and when I came back, I found I'd put on 14 kilos. And there are many ways of losing weight. I think Ruby Rosa and Ali Khan have the best way, but I'm married, And I tried practically everything, couldn't lose any weight. So that was the end of my riding career. And at that time, a friend of mine had been doing a little automobile racing, and he got me interested in it. And I think I went to the automobile show with him and met Chinetti, who asked me to come and drive, as he called it, in the Pan American. What it really involved was sitting next to him while he drove. And I was naturally very frightened, but I thought it had a charm all of its own, and decided to take it up as a career.
What kind of a ride was that?
Well, Luigi is a very safe driver, but I remember that they give every driver a booklet at the side of the race, and I remember being handed the booklet, and I was trying to find some place to put it so it wouldn't fly out of the car. And we were just going down a straight, and Luigi hit a bump, and I remember going straight up into the air, and I don't know how I didn't fall out of the car. And from then on, I just remember holding on as hard as I could to whatever I could find to hold on. And I was terrified. I think anybody who sits next to a racing driver is terrified during a race. very unpleasant.
That was 5 days of that.
No, fortunately it was only 2 days. The car broke down on the second bit. That was my first experience. Then I met Harry Schell, and we decided to go to Buenos Aires for the 1,000-kilometer race, which we did, and Harry, who'd been driving for about, I think at that time, 7 years, seemed to me more like God than anybody else. But he wouldn't show me how to change gear, he wouldn't show me how to drive the car, because he was terrified I'd break it in practice. The race was 1,000 kilometers, and after about 700 kilometers, Harry naturally was a little tired and came into the pits. Said, okay, now you drive it. Well, I got into the car, drove 1 lap, which was 10 kilometers, and saw Harry out on the track with a red flag trying to make me stop because I was going so slowly. And I stopped the next time around, and Harry got back into the car and finished the race in second position. That was my first race, 2 laps. Then we went to Sebring. But in Buenos Aires we had a little trouble with the clutch, so Harry thought that we should take the clutch to pieces. And I agreed with him because I knew that he knew a lot about the mechanical parts of racing cars. But when we took it to pieces, Harry told me he didn't know anything about mechanics. So we had to put it together again, and we had 53 extra nuts and bolts. However, that didn't break. The rear axle broke. So I still hadn't really driven a racing car. I had to go back to Europe then, and I sold my Ferrari and decided to buy a smaller car, which was a Maserati. And the chief mechanic at Maserati's, Bertocchi, spent an entire afternoon teaching me how to change gear. So at last I knew how to change gear. Then I went to Le Mans in 1954 and drove with Talo Tomasi. This was my first race. And we drove for 12 hours before the car eventually broke down, like all Maseratis, at 4 o'clock in the morning. Then I went to Metz with a Maserati where I won my first race. After that, we drove at Reims in the 12-hour race. I drove with Louis Chiron, and we broke down 20 minutes before the end. We were leading our class. So I thought, well, that's enough of the Maserati. So I sold the Maserati and bought an Oscar. Went to the Grand Prix of Germany with it and turned over on the 5th lap. This was my first serious accident. After that, I sold the Oscar and got a Ferrari. And since then, I've only driven Ferraris. I went to the Pan American race in Mexico and broke down after 200 kilometers. I knew the course very well. Roberto Mieres, the Argentine driver, and myself had done 12,000 kilometers driving up and down the roads. So we knew the whole course from start to finish. I did 200 kilometers during the race and he did 180. So we had 3 weeks, which gone to hell, no good at all. After that I went to Nassau, still in 1954, where I won 2 races and came in second on the 3rd race. Then I started to think that I had arrived, that I knew how to drive, and that Ferrari should give me a contract. So I went to see him, and he wasn't very encouraging, because I don't think he'd ever heard of Nassau in the first place. And anyhow, I continued to drive on my own all during 1955, and I was lucky. I won 2 or 3 races. Then I went to Silverstone, and I had my second serious accident. I broke my leg. It was in practice. It wasn't even during the race. It was raining, and as I came into a corner, my gear broke, and I went straight off the road and hit a bank. So that took care of the summer, and I couldn't race again before September, when I went to Goodwood with Mike Hawthorne. Mike started off and was doing very well when we broke the clutch, and we had to make a 12-minute pit stop. And eventually, we went from 1st to 42nd place, I think. But by 9 o'clock that evening, we were back in 3rd place when I broke the rear axle. After that, I went to Caracas. where I was very lucky and managed to finish second behind Fangio. Fortunately, all the Italian newspaper men and all the Italian racing managers were there and were impressed by the fact that at one point I'd been 52 seconds behind Fangio and I'd managed to get to within 8 seconds of him when I ran out of brakes. So that's when they really started to notice me. Next came Nassau again, where I won 3 races and came in second again in the Governor's Trophy, in the Nassau Trophy, which I never seemed to be able to win. And that was the end of 1955. Then this year, as you know, I've driven for Ferrari officially all season. And I feel in every race that I'm getting a little bit better.
What kind of a guy is Ferrari? I'm very curious to know what the man is like.
Well, Ferrari's a dictator. If he doesn't like you, he won't sell you a car. But as far as I'm concerned, he's a wonderful guy. I don't think I can say any more than that about it.
Does he actually control the teams himself, or does he have a manager?
No, he has the final word in every decision that is made in the factory. But we have 2 racing managers. We have one technical manager whose responsibility is the cars, the equipment, the mechanics, the tires. And we have what they call a sporting manager whose responsibility are the drivers and the time charts and the lap times. So they divide the responsibility between them.
Do you have your own car to the extent that it's all completely adjusted to fit you?
No, theoretically, Fangio has the first choice of any car. Say we have 4 cars in a race. Well, if Fangio is the fastest driver, it's only normal that he should have the first choice. This year I was the 4th driver, so I didn't have a choice. But I usually got a pretty good car anyhow. Because the 4 cars aren't obviously not exactly identical, but they're pretty close to one another. The maximum of, say, 5 horsepower difference between the most powerful and the least powerful. The only way I can tell whether a car is good or not is by my times.
Is this a general attitude in drivers, and most of them just...
Well, I would say 50% of the drivers have a lot of mechanical knowledge, and the other 50%, of which I am one, have no mechanical knowledge. If I wish to terrify the mechanics, I walk towards the car with a screwdriver. And to me, cars aren't the interesting part about automobile racing. The interesting part about automobile racing is to be able to go faster than somebody else.
You've been involved in many other sports, and bobsledding and horse racing, jumping. Have you found that any of the lessons, perhaps, that you've learned in these sports, or any of the techniques you've learned in these sports, have applied in any way to sports car driving?
Well, I believe, and I firmly believe this, that riding horses helps one in many sports because it gives you a sensitivity that otherwise maybe you wouldn't acquire. And I know Sterling Moss has ridden a lot, Peter Collins has ridden a lot. And automobile racing, in my opinion, is purely a matter of sensitivity. Every curve has a theoretical maximum speed, and the ambition of a racing driver is to go around that curve as close to the maximum speed as he can without going over it. So it becomes a matter of sensitivity.
Is there a very marked point at which you can feel a car is out of control, or do you have this feeling?
You know it. The second the car is out of control, you're all too aware of it.
I understood a couple of years ago the Lancias were noted for behaving beautifully, but once they did let go, they just literally flew off the road like projectiles.
Well, most drivers dislike a car that doesn't warn you. Some cars will break loose and they won't warn you, but a Ferrari gives you a lot of warning. You know when it's going to happen, and often you can correct it just before it happens. Because once the car has started to go, there's nothing you can do. I have a theory. I just keep my foot on the brake, but some drivers don't. On the grounds that it's going to stop a little bit sooner than it would otherwise. Because the spin is nothing, and in America most of the circuits are in airports, so it's flat and there's nothing to hit. The danger when you spin is when you hit something. then the car would turn over and then you're in trouble.
Is there any sort of average or that causes most accidents? I mean, is there any single factor that's responsible?
Yes, the drivers overdoing it. Mechanically, no. I would say it's very rare that the same mechanical failure occurs twice. But all you need is, I don't know, a couple of drops of oil on a corner and you can have 10 accidents within 10 seconds. And it's nobody's fault.
Do you think certain kinds of drivers are particularly suited to certain kinds of cars?
No, I think if a man is a good driver, he can adapt himself to any car. At least I hope so. Well, I think if a man is going to become a good driver, he can drive a Ferrari at the start. Maybe not a 5-liter, but he can certainly drive a 2-liter Ferrari at the start. All you must have is respect for the car. I have enormous respect for the Grand Prix Ferrari. And I realize that if I treat it badly, it can very easily kill me. But I have a lot of respect for it. And you must get to the point to which I haven't got in Grand Prix cars, but I have in sports cars, in which when I'm driving a sports car, I feel as if I am part of the car. And I feel that in a corner, when I swing the car around the corner, that it's part of me. I don't have that feeling yet in a Grand Prix car. I hope I will get it very soon.
Can you remember at all your sensations the first time you ever drove a Ferrari?
Yes, I remember starting off, and I had both hands on the steering wheel, and I wanted to put it in the second gear, and I think I went off the road trying to put it in the second gear.
What's your favorite race of all the great races?
I think my favorite circuit is Nürburgring in Germany. It's a 14-mile course and it has 183 turns or corners, and it has a straight of 4 miles, 4 kilometers rather. And that's definitely my favorite circuit.
That's only for sports cars, isn't it?
No, they have sports cars and the Grand Prix of Germany there every year.
But besides yourself, who do you think on the horizon at the moment?
I don't think anybody can compare with Fangio, now or in the past. I think the only way anybody will be world champion in the next few years is if Fangio retires. Fangio is definitely the best. Moss is equally definitely the second best. Third, you have Peter Collins. And fourth, you have about 4 drivers. You have 5 drivers. You have Berra, Castellotti, Musso, Charles, and myself. And we're all about the same.
When you first started to drive, were you aware of a gigantic gulf between their conception of driving and yours, or you just look around and say, I understand, as soon as I learn the methods, I'll be there too?
No, I realized there was a gigantic gulf. Well, the first year I drove, I used to take a lot of chances. I used to go too fast. I didn't know what I was doing, and I'd usually go off the road. I think the first year I drove, I went off the road practically in every race I drove in. But I always know why I went off the road.
That's the big difference.
But I still have a terrific complex about Fangio, or even Moss. You know, if I see Fangio and Moss in front of me, well, Fangio and Moss. Maybe I could pass them, but I couldn't stay in front of them for 4 or 5 laps without going off the road. It's very easy, well, it's not very easy, but it's perfectly feasible for me to follow Fangio and Moss, because then I just do exactly what they do. But if I have to go in front of them and set the example, so to speak, well, it's very easy for me to go around a corner half a mile an hour too fast, or to brake 10 yards too late. Then I'm in trouble.
In this country, since the war, there's been a lot of focus on so-called styles. The Italian style, which most Americans think of as simply driving with the arms extended. Is there any recognizable style of driving that's peculiar to national groups? I mean, do Moss and Hawthorne drive in any way alike?
No, every driver has a different style of his own, and it depends a lot on the car you're driving, because some cars have narrower seats than others, some cars have less leg room, and in the new Maserati Grand Prix car, in fact, you're sitting at an angle, you're not even sitting straight forward, you're sitting at a slight angle. I think Fangio has the most relaxed style. Fangio must have the most relaxed style, and Hawthorne has the least relaxed style. Hawthorne always has an expression of a man who's fighting on his face. Peter Collins is always making faces at the crowd, not deliberately, but I've yet to see a picture of Peter in which he isn't making some kind of a face. Harry Scheller always wears any attractive women, you see.
And how can they see him at those?
Oh, it's amazing. You go around, you have to do like 80 laps on the circuit. You notice anybody who stands out a bit from the crowd.
Another question that's been running around in my mind is, are you interested in cars?
Not at all.
Not at all.
To me, they're either a means of transportation from point A to point B, or a racing car. And as I've always said, the best car in the world, in my opinion, is American Ford. Nothing can come close to it. But you know, it's true that if a man can afford to have one car and he has a family, what better purchase can he make than to buy a Ford?
But only you can say that. Because the American in our position is thinking of it as a family. Which sports car has the biggest back seat? It's exactly reversed.
Yes, but you know, you buy a Ford, you don't have to change the spark plugs to look at the engine or anything. You just leave the hood down and you keep it a year and you sell it and get a new one. And then you lose about $200 and you have no bother, no expenses. But if you buy even a Jaguar, which is pretty solid, you're always changing the spark plugs, putting in oil, special oil. God knows you spend...
That's the romance. The great light shining in the wilderness. Do you think there's any particular type of man? I mean, leaving aside the obvious and courage and good sense, stuff like that.
Well, I don't think courage is a requirement. I think a lack of fear is a requirement. And I think the man who wants to become an automobile driver has to have at least the spirit of an adventurer, because there's very little security in it. And he doesn't know if he's going to live, he doesn't know if he's going to be a success, he doesn't know if he's going to lose an arm or a leg. And you have far more disappointments in automobile racing than you do triumphs. It's a very hard business. Nobody has any sympathy for the driver who goes off the road. You expect it, but you don't get it. Everybody thinks of you as an idiot.
How about, this would imply that the secondary names that we read about constantly probably aren't making a very good living.
Well, once you've got a name, in Europe you can make a reasonable living just with the starting money you get. And Rosier, who has just died, was never a fast driver, but he was a rich man, I believe. But I know he made a lot of money racing because he would get good starting money every time. And Rosier was one of the nicest drivers there were. I would never have won the Tour de France last year without Rosier. The Tour de France, as you know, is a rally which lasts for 7 days. And each day you have a race, or 2 races on different circuits all over France. And I started off without even a map in my car. But I knew that Rosier was in the car in front of me. So all I did was follow Rosier for 7 days. It kept me from getting lost. Well, half an hour before the race where he got killed, where he got injured, he died later, he asked me to drive his car, and I said, all right. And then 5 minutes before the race, he said, I feel better, I'll do it myself. And Rosier never took a chance when he did 200 units, turnover.
Conception, there may be a misconception in the fans anyway, that there's an ironclad, unwritten law about discussing accidents, injuries, and so forth. Is this true?
We discuss them constantly.
That's what I thought.
But a driver usually gets killed on a Sunday. And if he's a close friend of yours, well, you think what a stupid sport this is, and you think seriously of giving it up. But on Monday you think, well, maybe it was just unlucky, maybe I shouldn't give it up yet, I'll give it up next year. So on the Tuesday you start thinking about, now, well, there's a race next Sunday, maybe I'll go. So on the Wednesday you go to the race. But it's ridiculous, it's like, if you remember in England they have an air show every year called Farnborough. Well, 3 years ago a plane exploded over the crowd at Farnborough and killed 57 people. Well, is that a reason to stop all air shows? It's just an extremely unfortunate occurrence. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, that happened at Sebring, and that's the end of Sebring.
This is why somehow there's got to be an appreciation sooner or later in this country and everywhere else of the kind of attitude that's necessary for racing, because we've been through events now that have been stopped for accidents. And we know a guy who quit racing because a good friend was killed in racing. And somehow in this country, for a kid who was let's say a minor executive in a law firm or an advertising agency, to be killed driving a car seems like the most idiotic waste. It isn't important because what he's doing isn't important. If a Marimon is killed trying to match his idol, this seems to me to be more worthwhile than for some American kid to get knocked off driving some car because it's the thing to do, which is, let's face it, what controls the thing. If ever we can reach the point where the Bermuda shorts and Madras shirt group will back out and let those who can and will take over, then we'll have racing in this country.
But well, I think you hit on the reason, the difference between the two, Paul, in that in Europe, well, let's say in America, it's much more important, much more publicized that a man kills himself driving a racing car than if he throws himself out of the 50th story window because he doesn't like his job. Whereas in Europe, they're concentrating on the enjoyment he gets out of doing a thing. Let's not even say enjoyment, the satisfaction for doing a job well, which I'm sure you're aware of in winning a race. It may be completely without sentiment, without emotion, but the satisfaction.
Oh, yeah, correct.
Did you have any sense of sort of inevitability when Ascari was killed? Did it seem to you to be in the cards, or just a horrible mistake?
No, it was, I thought, well, what a nice chap he was.
Well, there's a lot of writing over here at the time about how, what a weird sort of feeling about it, because the previous week he'd done the same damn thing. Very strange.
It takes a very minor nut on your car to fall off. What are you going to do? But if you think about it, there's no point in racing. It's better not to race. But usually the first sign you see of an accident is either the ambulance on the track or the crash car itself. And we always know who was in the car because we can remember the number or the color of the car. We always have some clue as to who it was. And if it's a friend of the driver, well, the pit will usually give you a signal saying he's all right, if he's all right. And otherwise, they just won't say anything. So, you know, as soon as the race is over, you ask how it's so and so, and then you hear. But I have a rule. I would never go see somebody who's been killed. I unfortunately went with Musi, the Swiss driver's wife, in the ambulance. She was a Spanish girl and she didn't speak very much French. And, well, I'm Spanish, so I went with her in the ambulance to see Musi. You know, his brain was over there, his head was over there. So,
one like that is enough.
Yeah. So I won't even go and see people in the hospital.
Well, it's strictly a matter, it's a calculated risk, that's all, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, every driver believes that it can never happen to him. I know that it won't happen to me. Inside me, I know it won't happen to me. I think all drivers feel that way.
And bloody well has to.
Did you know Ascari at all?
Yeah, he was always very nice to me. He helped me a lot. The thing that troubles us is when somebody gets killed because the steering arm broke or because a wheel came off. And that worries us a lot because then we think, well, if it happened on that car and I have to drive the same the same type of car could very well happen to me. That's very unpleasant.
Is the supremacy of Ferrari and Mercedes due as much to the drivers as it is to the car?
Well, Ferrari, I had dinner with Ferrari about a week before I left for Caracas. And we were talking about racing, as we usually do. And all of a sudden he said, but you know, the drivers will always go to the factory which produces the fastest cars. And I was just about to protest my loyalty to Ferrari when I realized that I would go somewhere else if they produced a faster car. So you'll find usually that the best drivers will automatically drive the fastest car. There's no loyalty to factory. And it's usually a gamble for the driver because I don't know what's going to be the best make next year. Maybe Maserati will be better than Ferrari, and I signed with Ferrari. Where does that leave me? So it's always a gamble. Moss is signed with Van Roel. That's even more of a gamble.
Is there a recognizable feeling of the Grand Prix of Germany and the Grand Prix of France? Does Berra get inspired during the Grand Prix of France, or is it just one more race?
No, because before the race, we know that theoretically we should finish in such and such a position. And if you do better than that, it's because of a piece of good luck, and if you do worse than that, it's because your car isn't going well. I mean, before, in Venezuela, there was Moss, Fangio, myself, Harry Schell, and some lesser drivers. Well, I had a better car than Harry Schell, so I knew that theoretically I should finish third. Because I know that I'm not as good a driver as Fangio and Moss. Now, if I had finished second, it would have been luck, because obviously either Fangio and Moss would have had a car that wasn't running perfectly. And if I finished fourth, or not finished, as I didn't finish, it would mean that I had bad luck with my car.
Is that clear cut?
Oh, yeah. I know that I'm faster than so-and-so, and I know that somebody else is faster than I am. I know it. And all I can hope for is that my car is going to run perfectly that day.
Of course, there arrives a point at which you will become better than so-and-so and move up a step.
That's what I hope.
Is this a very clear-cut point? I mean, do you recognize this?
No,
When you pass Moss and there you are?
Yes, but when I passed Moss, I think, well, this is rather peculiar. Something is wrong here. And, I hope he's going to stop altogether before his car gets going again.
Tell us something about your driving style. Ken. I'm sure you analyzed it.
Yes, well, I consider that my driving style is a relaxed driving style. I never worry about whether the car is going to break down, because I think that if it breaks down, it breaks, and there's nothing I can do about it. The only thing I'm very careful about is I try not to overwork the engine, and I try to change gears as smoothly as possible. But, the driving style hasn't really too much to do with how fast you go. You can have a very ugly driving style and go extremely fast, and you can have a perfect driving style and go very slowly. I can tell you anything about my style.
What do you wear, for example, in the drive?
Well, I wear a sports shirt and a pair of light trousers with no cuffs, and I wear a pair of bicycle racers shoes, because they're made of very thin leather and they're very pliable, yet they have hard soles. I don't believe in wearing suits or overalls or uniforms, as some drivers do. First of all, because if you get gas on your clothes and catches fire, you'll have a far harder time getting out of an overall than you will out of a shirt and a pair of trousers. So I dress very casually.
How much, not sloppy, but let's say rough driving will a Grand Prix car stand?
You never know. You can over-rev it 10 times maybe and get away with it, but you can over-rev it once and you'll break the engine right away. Anytime you over-rev an engine, you're taking a big chance. Unfortunately, there's a second needle on the RPM dial which stays put at the maximum RPM to which you've gone. And they have a special key to put this needle back, so there's no way the driver can ever put it back to the authorized RPM. So the factory always knows to where you've been. I think Mike Hawthorne once tried to develop a system with a magnet to get it back to 7,000 RPM. That's the first thing they look at.
Well, this brings up another point. If there's that much of an interest in what the driver's been doing out there, what sort of a relationship is there between the driver and, let's say, well, Ferrari is pretty much an autocrat. Let's say, is he the patron and you're a highly skilled and well-paid but still an employee?
No, I think that Ferrari has a somewhat fatherly attitude towards his drivers. And he's very, very kind to us. Whenever I go to Modena, Ferrari asks me to dinner, and I like him very much.
Do most of the drivers have a sort of recognizable zest for living fairly high?
Unfortunately, yes.
Good food.
I would say the most serious driver of all is Fangio. We very rarely see Fangio in between practice periods and the race period, because he always lives in a small hotel. He's usually with his wife, and he leads a very quiet life, whilst the other drivers are less serious.
I mean, is there any kind of a sort of a group I can't think of the proper word, but sort of any kind of an inclination toward reaching for the same extremes in every phase of living as you do in cars. And if a driver likes wine, he's going to research.
No, there are very, very few drivers who drink at all. I can only think of two who drive, who remain nameless. But, the drivers are very normal set. We like drivers who drink at all. I can only think of two who drive, who remain nameless. But, the drivers are very normal set. We like women. All the drivers are, naturally chasing all the women that are around. And, the night before the race, everybody's very serious. Everybody goes to bed about 10 o'clock. But on the Thursday evening and the Friday evening, well, there's usually something going on. And we're all very close friends, really, see. I mean, even if two drivers actually don't like each other, there's such a great feeling of camaraderie between them that it overcomes the dislike. And then they might think on the Monday, well, I don't like that just. But on the Friday when we're together, we all kind of get on very well.
Are there any villains?
Not really, no. I don't think so.
Can't afford them, I suppose.
No. I think that automobile racing is one of the cleanest sports in the world today, chiefly because if a driver is unkind to me, well, I have two solutions. Either I can slow down and wait for him to lap me, when I can be unkind to him, or as he very well knows, we're going to race together next Sunday, so I can, if I can restrain myself and wait until next Sunday, then I can get back at him then. So you'll very rarely find a driver being deliberately unsporting to another driver.
Well, this is the case for sportsmanship. It's a matter of necessity.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, but it's the results that count, and it's a very clean sport. Well, there used to be a driver who, when you passed him, would look at you with a horrified expression in his eyes, and then point at your left rear wheel, or your right rear wheel, as the case might be. However, finally, he lost his left rear wheel and got killed.
Is there any gambling on races?
Well, amongst the drivers, sometimes. But unfortunately, there's no gambling on the races, because I don't think anybody trusts the drivers enough.
Did you say unfortunately?
Yes, unfortunately.
You mentioned the other day when we were talking, Cleve, about the, I don't know quite how to describe this, let's say the good old-fashioned sportsmanship as represented perhaps by the English school of sportsmen, the playing fields of Eton, etc. How, yes, exactly. Do you find this kind of sportsmanship, the game for the game's sake, much?
Now, in England, one finds a lot of men who race on Saturdays and weekends purely for the sake of racing. But once you get amongst the professional drivers, you'll find very little of that. But an amateur driver today is, in Europe at least, a man who isn't good enough to be a professional. But everybody, no matter how wealthy they are, who drives, aims to become a professional driver.
Well, I will be presumptuous enough to say that you're probably not in it for the money.
No, but it helps.
Why do you race?
Because I want to be champion of the world. Life to me is a wonderful thing. And even if I live to be 100, I still won't be able to do a 20th of all the things I want to do, or read all the books I want to read. And I plan to get the most out of it, but I have no time to lose. And I certainly wouldn't race unless I thought I could accomplish what I want to accomplish.
You're sort of defeating your own purpose in a way, because racing has to exclude a great number of other things by its very nature.
Yes, but I've given racing so many years of my life, and then I will stop completely. I will never race again.
Supposing you find you'll listen to 60.
That's a mean question. I've had long, serious chats with Sanjo.
There's hope. Well, if you become champion once, will that be it? Will you then retire?
No, not necessarily. I will give up automobile racing when I reach a certain age.
And you've already determined this age?
Oh, yes.
Is that another leading question, to ask what age?
No, I will give up automobile racing when I'm 35.
Have you got some sort of idea about if you have an arbitrary end to the racing career at 35, is it because that you think that's enough, or because there's something else you want to do then?
Oh no, I think that a racing driver can go on to at least 45, but there are many things I want to do. And I can think of a lot of things I want to do when I'm 35. And automobile racing is practically a full-time job. Gives you very little time for anything else.
After 35, what?
Well, there's another thing connected with automobile racing which might sound a little bit corny, but it's very true. Racing drivers live very near to death every Sunday afternoon. But you'll find that it gives us a greater appreciation of life. You'll find that drivers are a very happy lot of people, because they appreciate life far more than the average man does.
In order to enhance life, you're deliberately seeking out an artificial means to give it meaning. And do you think that a racing driver, without the stimulus of an extremely dangerous sport, would have the same zest for living?
I do, because the racing driver is not necessarily a brave man, but he is a man who is not afraid. And if he wasn't racing cars, he would be doing, I don't know, if he'd lived 1,000 years ago, he would have been in the Crusades. If he'd lived 600 years ago, he'd be killing dragons or saving maidens in distress. But nowadays, the only person who can help a maiden in distress is a doctor. Now, I know that the English will take a very dim view of this, but in my opinion, it's more a Latin sport than an Anglo-Saxon sport. Yeah, of course, it would be considered a sport. But I think the Latin mentality is more suited to it than the Anglo-Saxon. Because the Anglo-Saxon attitude would be one of bulldog tenacity, and keep going the whole race. But the Latin will take a chance at a given point that maybe the Anglo-Saxon wouldn't take. I'm not insinuating in any way that he's braver than the Anglo-Saxon, but maybe for the last few laps he could turn on an extra bit of power that the Anglo-Saxon wouldn't have.
Well, that's what I mean. Why then, since it is more ideally suited, isn't the ratio upside down? Why aren't there 30 fine Italian drivers and only half a dozen British? You mean the British drivers that exist are pretty good, but not that good, and not much chance of getting that good?
Well, you have 3 who are extremely good, but after that, I don't see any hopefuls to take their places. Quite frankly, there's a dearth of drivers everywhere right now. I think the only young man who is going to become very good is Von Trips right now. I don't see anybody in Italy or Spain or France.
Is there any hope for any of the American drivers?
Well, it's very hard to say. I don't think they take the Italian manufacturers take the American drivers very seriously. I know that Carroll Shelby went over to Ferrari and said, well, I won 34 races this year. Ferrari said, who was second? And Carroll's a very nice guy, but how can he improve? He has nobody to improve against. You know what I mean?
What about the American drivers who have competed in Europe?
I think possibly Marston Gregory is better than so far. But I don't know. Yeah, it's a very long process. And I've been extremely lucky. Really extremely lucky.
The Marquis de Portago died in his Ferrari on the 12th of May, 1957. His death brought to an end, in a most characteristic fashion, one of the most colorful sporting careers of the century. But Fahn was more than a sportsman. He was an adventurer and a rebel, and to most people,